already. So it feels like we're getting towards some part of a kind of inflection point, and there's some really good critical mass there. The second big announcement was the publication of kind of the blueprint or the roadmap for what the TNFD is calling its Nature Data Public Facility. So this essentially is intended as a central mechanism that can bring together and pool state of nature data from all different types of places. So lots of the feedback that we hear is, okay, it's great that state of nature data exists out there, but it's often hard to find, to clean, to process, and to use. So the idea would be there's just one central hub you come to, you put in some information about what kind of company you are, what kind of data you're looking for, and it will pop you straight to the right places. And maybe even you can download that data through an API, all publicly available and open access. So this first step in that journey was announcing the principles that need to underline that facility and a bit of the roadmap for how this is going to be developed over the next year, with a go, no go decision planned for around kind of like mid 2025. And then the third piece that I'll leave you with is a discussion paper on transition planning. So it's helping move the conversation from disclosures to what companies can actually do on this and action that they can take. So thinking more about developing a nature strategy. And so what TNFD has provided to this space is almost, you can think of it like a template for if you were to develop a nature dedicated transition plan. So what are the different components that it can include, and how does that relate to things like the TNFD metrics, and how could you talk and then present and disclose these transition plans? So it doesn't, of course, tell you all of the things that need to go in that. That's a lot of hard work that also needs to be done that comes from the businesses themselves. But if there's anyone on the call that's thinking, I would like to start thinking about what this looks like in terms of action and strategy for my company, that's a really nice way to start to try and visualize it. And then as we go into next year in 2025, a lot of the TNFD's focus will be on piloting those two things. So piloting the data facility and piloting the transition plan guidance. So again, if anybody in the call is interested in getting involved in either of those, please do reach out, because we'd be very happy to work with you. And that's it.
Nice one, Charlie. Yeah, congrats on the 500. Nice and timely, that, isn't it? I'm
It
sure
is.
you're
It
all right.
was it was a target that we had for quite a while, and you can imagine with it being 502, there was a lot of people working quite hard in the build up to make sure that we got there. So we were quite happy, yes.
Yeah, 499 isn't quite the same,
Doesn't
is
have the
it?
same ring, no.
Well, well done. I'm sure if people will have some comments and questions for you. So if you want to stick around, and then guys, if you've got some questions for Charlie, let's definitely have them in the chat, or just put your hand up would be even better. I know we had some of the members there. So Annie and Gwen and Carolyn, I think you guys were there as well. But Annie, I think you're there from Tetra Pak, aren't you? Would you mind perhaps sharing some reflections from COP, perhaps what you think was practically very useful for you, and things that came out of it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it was a really interesting conference overall. I think in one hand, it kind of like put the spotlight on the kind of urgency of the whole nature crisis. I think we certainly heard a lot about that. Really kind of UN Secretary General talking about this existential crisis, and I think a lot of quite stark warnings in terms of the data and where things are going. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think really in terms of the kind of progress that we've seen from like governments, as well as unfortunately the negotiations themselves didn't really reflect that sense of urgency. So while there were some successes, of course, in terms of the negotiations, yeah, I'm sure you follow the media coverage. There were a few things that were kind of left unresolved that would have been really key. For example, the financial mechanism for financing the GBF work. But personally, I thought it was really like kind of contrasting that there was a lot of energy in the kind of private sector part of the conference as such. There was really, I think there were over 3,000 participants from businesses, which I think is really shot up from the last one in Montreal. A lot of things happening. There were quite some exciting work on metrics. The Nature Positive Initiative launched their State of Nature metrics. WBCSD also has their portal for nature-related metrics that more focus on the pressure and response. we ourselves participate in quite a few discussions about nature strategies. We launched our nature strategy earlier this year, and it's now one of the 26 strategies, I think, that have been launched as a part of this It's Now for Nature campaign of the Business for Nature. So it was certainly quite exciting to hear that lots of companies are really starting to put out there what they're planning to do for nature. I think it was also quite key that we had the first set of SBTN validated targets launched there. I think 3 different companies who've now set specific targets that have been validated for SBTN. Lot on nature tech. There's this nature tech collective, lots of different tech companies that are trying to resolve issues from assessment to finance. So I think there's a lot of quite exciting movement there. So I think just lots of announcement, lots of information, lots of kind of learnings that I'm certainly taking out of there. And I think finally, there was a really active participation from civil society, indigenous communities, which I thought was great. But at the same time, I think the conversations of the governments in one hand, civil society in other, and the private sector still felt a bit disjointed. There wasn't so many, I think, events that kind of brought those 3 different sort of sectors or types of actors to really talk to each other. So I think that's maybe something that I do hope that will kind of move forward a little bit in the future. So you don't quite have those kind of 3 siloed sets of discussions that don't necessarily really connect to each other. I think that's it for main
That's really
reflections
useful.
from my side.
Coming back to the kind of what can we learn from climate, this all sounds very eerily familiar. That private sector taking the lead, negotiations not really delivering what they should be. It all sounds very familiar. It shows that again that business has to take the lead on this, and we have to lead the way. It seems that way, definitely. Gwen, are you there? Would you mind sharing what you found?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Oliver. So I think Annie covered a lot of the conversations that we were hearing from corporates. One thing I'd add to that is there was also a lot of dialogue on supply chain. I think this probably reflects a lot of the conversations that we've had here on EUDR. Within the finance community, though, the conversation was all about fundamentals. And I feel that was probably more practical than a lot of the other kind of climate COPs that I've been to if we transport and go back in time and see where we're at in the same kind of historic juncture. All about bankability, lots of panels on what nature positive actually means. UNEP FI, I think, put out a report on that. There's a couple, WEF also put out the definition on what they think nature positive means. There was a very big point on bankability that was made all across the kind of financial market participant space. One of the pension folks was like, well, it's great that we're having a positive impact on nature, but I can't tell my pensioners that they're not going to get paid. So that was fundamentally the conversation that was being hammered out. So what that meant in terms of solutions was embedding data and metrics. That was a huge selling point into bread and butter financial products and how folks are going about doing that. Conversations on debt for nature transactions, biodiversity credits was also there. A lot of project developers within the carbon space. PE firms were also out in force. And then Nature Action 100 also released their benchmark of how they felt the corporates that they're following are doing right now. And then I think on the back of the negotiations, what was clear in that, there weren't any monitoring or figuring out how we're going to get to the 30 by 30 targets and where the financial mechanisms are going. We know from the last 2 years, the GBBF is still underfunded. So a lot of question marks on what does that then mean for the NBSAPs? Because only, I think, a little bit more than 20% of the countries have released something. And then biodiversity credits, as I mentioned, was having a moment. Within that, the main message that I got from the IAPB conversation was it's not going to be fungible. They're not proposing secondary markets. It's going to be a local to local conversation. So from a scale perspective, I don't know what that means. And then there was one last point that I wanted to make. Yeah, I'm blanking. So anyway, so with oh yeah, I know now, the Cali Fund. So within the Cali Fund, the other one was on digital sequencing information and the potential sharing of profits/revenues from that. It was one of these big commitments, again, similar to what was done with the GBBF, but the practicality of how that's going to be implemented and which corporates are going to be involved in that aspect is also a big question mark at the moment.
Really interesting. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Carolyn, are you there? Would you mind sharing some of your thoughts? Find the mute button. Need to unmute, Carolyn.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I think everything's been said really. They're fantastic summaries. It's COP's an amazing kind of experience, I think. It's like all these very serious people huddled in rooms going around in circles, surrounded by this kind of big circus of energy outside. It's a very, yeah. I did wonder a couple of times if I really should be at home, like creating wetlands, if that would have more value. Yeah, I think it was frustrating. It was frustrating that the negotiations haven't got further, but perhaps not unsurprising. I think one interesting point that has come out in terms of kind of the social community aspect is the broadening of Indigenous peoples, local communities, and Afro descendants. So that was a bit that I was quite interested in. I think in terms of the business, I mean, it's fantastic that there were so many people there from business, but I still think we kind of need to move the conversation on from why to how. There was still a lot of getting stuck on this why, and I think we know why. We just need to get on and do it. And I think there were not that many examples of kind of practical ways in which companies are now implementing their commitments, their goals, their aims. So it would be nice to see that maybe for the next one. I was also quite surprised, okay, maybe this is a bit naive for me. So I come from the NGO sector before I moved into corporate. And this was sort of back in the early 2010s. And there was starting to be this shift from NGOs thinking business with a big bad world to actually embracing and partnering. And I think we've come a very, very long way in that. And it's fantastic that the NGO business partnerships that you can have. But I was quite surprised by how there was still quite a bit of anti-business sentiment. And I had a couple of nature peers that got verbally attacked in their sessions by NGO groups, which I thought was quite sad. But it does show that we still need to work on building the trust around what we're doing, and sorry, it's really busy traffic. The authenticity of what we're doing, I think that's really, really important to show that yes, some sectors do have a questionable past, or they're certainly trying to change their business models, and it just shows that we need to bring all these different aspects of NGO groups, whether they're more focused on the environment or whether they're focused on the social along with on the ride with us. Lastly, I have to plug. We had a session on invasive alien invasive alien species in business, which I was so excited about, because I think, invasive alien species is one of the biggest drivers, but it's a little bit elephant of the room. People don't like to talk about it or deal with it. So I was really excited that FFI and IUCN had this session hosted by the TNFD around invasives, because I think this is a really cool area where, again, lots of collaboration between companies, between sectors, with different groups of society can really drive positive action. So that's my feedback.
Awesome. Brilliant. And just update on the rest. Carolyn, you're from CRH, which is building materials and the construction industry. Gwen's from JP Morgan, and he's from Tetra Pak as well. So again, I'm going to say to anyone else, if anyone else was there and wants to put their hand up and just share some quick reflections, they're very welcome. Just one final quick question maybe to you, Annie, Gwen and Carolyn, very quickly. Was there anything in particular, specifically, that you've come away thinking that you'll do differently in the kind of next few months? Maybe Annie, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I guess I was kind of thinking a lot about the kind of what actors in different parts of the value chain, being corporates, where we don't own our own forest or manage forest, but we're very dependent on products that come from forests. What are the most impactful actions that we can actually do? Because often there's still a lot of focus on kind of disclosure. Of course, we have targets on, certification, deforestation free, etc. But I think sometimes it's still a little bit like removed in terms of like, okay, well, what will be the actual impacts that we'll be able to have upstream our supply chain? So I think that's just something that I have been thinking a lot about, and how we can kind of in this sector of with forest related products, how we can have more of an impact, and actually maybe hopefully somehow also measure that in the future.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Gwen, same question.
I'll again focus on fundamentals to make a lot of the metrics that we're using now more robust, and figure out what needs to happen for the projects to be bankable, and then to not let perfection get in the way, because we just kind of have to keep going and iterating to get all this done.
Yeah, good advice, always. Kaz?
So I'm going to try two things. So I've come away. So it's I think the nice thing about COP is it's a really cool meeting place that's truly international. Often, like with the business and biodiversity, you either have Bloom, which is more states-based, or the e-business biodiversity, which is European. There's not one thing that's really international. So it was great to have that opportunity to meet so many people and get ideas. And I think I spent quite a bit of time with my sector peers, and we're really engaged as a sector. How can we push our association to support us with a lot of this, particularly supply chain? So that's one of the actions that's come out, how we can do more collaboratively to make strides in this. And I've forgotten the second one already, so that's fine.
No, that's right. That's good. It comes back to you. So just going to pause very briefly to say if anyone else wants to put their hand up and share any thoughts or ask any questions, actually. Michael.
Thank you very much. Michael from Business for Nature. Just for those who are meeting for the first time, many of you know that Business for Nature was also active on the ground, supporting businesses in the negotiations, but also as part of all the events that were happening as part of the surround sound. And I think for us going into COP16, it was very clear that this was an opportunity for us to work as stakeholders to support this or usher in this new era of implementation. And coming out of COP16, I think there is a real sort of cause for concern, a real cause for an alarm to really rethink how, as the business group, we can support the delivery of the global biodiversity framework. Like many of you mentioned, I think the urgency is very clear, and that was resonating across all the conversations. I think we now know why we need to act. And a lot of the things that you've mentioned, just to summarize, that COP indeed really focused on the money, the people, but also the progress that needs to be made. So on focusing on the money, we realized that things like the Cali Fund being one of perhaps the brighter spots. While it is voluntary, we realized that we need to create some dedicated fund to support DSI and support equitable and fair sharing of digital biodiversity. Where we also saw that there was perhaps an opportunity for businesses to continue this push for more financing is around the resource mobilization efforts, which didn't really come up strongly in the negotiations. And there's more room for us to engage as businesses to understand, one, how do we work with governments to mobilize the resources needed, but how can businesses themselves also help close some of that financing gap? And then the third piece, which is really important and perhaps not talked about as much, is really around the environmentally harmful subsidies, which has been one that companies have been talking about. We know that businesses are beneficiaries of some of these environmentally harmful subsidies. So again, back to the points that I think Karen was making when we talk about a lot of businesses being on the ground and building trust with NGOs. I think the more businesses that we are able to pull together to be leaders and at the forefront of having some of these difficult discussions going into the next COP will be critical. We also realized that that COP provided a really powerful showcase of cross-stakeholder collaborations. As you've seen, this was the first COP that we've seen Indigenous people and local communities being really strongly held at the center. There was a whole subsidiary body now instituted within the convention, which is the first time that we're seeing Indigenous people brought so strongly into the process. So that was really helpful. We know that businesses, cities, a whole suite of stakeholders were brought together. And perhaps where we now see coming back is the opportunity for us to really build that stakeholder connection. I think, Caroline, you also mentioned that there was an opportunity, or Annie, you were mentioning that there could be even more opportunities for us to create more cross-stakeholder dialogues between businesses, civil society, and government, and making sure that that dialogue is not only happening at COP, but also throughout the year. And that's something that Business for Nature, we wanted to continue doing. But we're super happy and impressed by the progress that we're seeing from companies, particularly in developing nature strategies. As Annie mentioned, we now have about 25 companies that have gone through the process of developing and publishing what we consider to be credible nature strategies as part of the Now for Nature campaign. I think the conversation is swiftly transitioning into these concretized plans of or transition planning that TNFD have now developed additional guidance on. We worked in the lead up to COP with TNFD, GFANS, CDP, WWF, because we realized that there is also a plethora of resources coming for businesses around how to further develop these transition plans. And it's going to be important to also then align with all these different tools, resources, and frameworks that are coming up on transition planning. So we put out a report, or sort of a short explainer, not a report, or an explainer of how all these resources are complementing each other. What is the best entry point for businesses that are at the beginning of their nature strategy development, those that are more mature, and what resource will be best suited for them. So I think that's just a little bit of a summary that I would also get from the Business for Nature side. I think there's lots of lessons that we've taken and really looking forward to building sort of more concretized way of engagement going into COP17 for businesses. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers, Michael. That was great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. So Rebecca, are you there? It'd be great to have your thoughts from IBAT, or however you refer to yourselves.
Yes, definitely. Is it worth me sharing a couple of slides? Is that
why not? Why not?
I don't know how long we've got, so I haven't prepared that.
We've got 20 minutes in total. We maybe have a couple more thoughts before the end. So if you take 10 minutes or so. Is it Bieniaszewska?
Bieniaszewska, yeah, I did have my thumb up earlier on.
Good, very good. I put more effort into that than I did the Trump video. So but yeah, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm just gonna see if you can see my slides.
We can.
Okay, I might just make you smaller, so I won't be able to see you, but
Right.
so thank you very much, everybody. As I said, my name's Rebecca. I'm engagement lead. I'm fairly new to this, but been so excited to be invited today. I won't go through this whole slide deck, but I'll talk a little bit about what IBAT is, why it might be useful, and it was really interesting actually just now in the mining discussion to think around how what we have might be useful. I didn't want to interrupt the flow, so I didn't say anything, but yeah, it sounded really good. And then there might be a bit of time to go through a Q&A, perhaps not. So, okay. So what is IBAT then? Well, we are a web-based mapping system and an early risk screening tool. And we provide global authoritative biodiversity data sets. And it's really for that early stage impact. It's about identifying risks that you might be exposed to, in addition to identifying opportunities to contribute positively to nature. So who are we? We are a collaboration between 4 of the world's largest and most influential conservation organisations. We are BirdLife International, Conservation International, the International Union for Conservation for Nature, and the United Nations Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre. IBAT performs the role of a cost recovery mechanism, which helps it's reinvested back into the data sets that we look after, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But it's really around building integrity. So you need the right insights to make informed business decisions. This is based on ground truth data that is science-backed. We want to make a big impact. So I just spoke there about the investment back into these data sets. And then obviously the insights, and that helps with assessing the different risks and understanding what you might need to do next when it comes to a specific site, or whether it's a project you're thinking of, or even investment. So just to talk about the 3 data sets very briefly, you have the World Database on Protected Areas, WDPAs, and they are updated monthly. And then the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species and the World Database of Key Biodiversity Areas, both of those are updated twice a year. IBAT is the only place where each of these data sets is available for commercial users. Each time the data sets are updated in their respective sources, they are also updated in the IBAT platform as well. And the role really is for us to say, okay, how can we make this data accessible and help inform those decisions? Looking at the World Database on Protected Areas then, this is a joint initiative by Protected Planet, managed by Protected Planet, a joint initiative by UNEP, WCMC and IUCN, all the acronyms. What are these? These are a specific geographic area, recognised, dedicated and protected legally or through other effective means. I would say the most comprehensive global database on terrestrial and marine protected areas. Examples might include the Natura 2000 sites, UNESCO World Heritage Site, a real array from that through to your local nature reserves. They are also the headline indicator for Target 3 of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which, as you know, aims to conserve 30% of land, seas and water by 2030. And then looking at the World Database of Key Biodiversity Areas, these are the biodiversity hotspots and a global standard for identifying the most important places in the world for species and their habitats. Alliance for Zero Extinction sites are a subset of KBAs, and the KBAs are managed by BirdLife International. They represent a consortium of 13 different organisations that you see at the bottom of the slide there. And the data set managed by them is often represents different taxonomic groups as well, I should say. And then the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. This index looks at from least concern, if you can see that on the screen, all the way up to extinction. It is, I think it was established about 60 years ago, and in fact it just celebrated its birthday at COP16 for those who were there. It has over 160,000 species in the database, and I think it might even be 166,000. So there's been a lot of hard work going into that to make sure that those are recorded. Crucially to IBAT, it provides range maps. If we look at those now, just have something popping up on my screen there. I hope you can still see. So looking at those, the range maps help us create two derived data layers. And the first one is the rarity weighted richness layer. This one is broken down into 10-kilometer grid cells, and the species ranges are covered by the cell. And then the species threat abatement and restoration style metric. And this quantifies the potential contributions that species threat abatement and restorations activities can offer towards reducing extinction risk. And this was brought to mind in the last conversation during mining, and how we can measure the impact of reducing or abating impact on species. I will say the star layer is quantitative and scalable, meaning that you can compare it different sites across your portfolio with a globally relevant metric. And we've spent a lot of time working with the private sector since we officially launched in 2008. As I mentioned, there's the opportunity to screen for risk and think about supply chains and investments. It covers due diligence as well. And there are a number of reporting options that IBAT helps support through the various reports that can be produced. At the moment, we have a number of organisations which work with us regularly, in addition to consultancies and representatives from specific sectors. We have been referenced in many key regulations, frameworks and standards, and for those of you who were at COP16, you may have bumped into members of our team there. We hosted a number of sessions, including panels and trainings. I will say that for anybody that has a presence in Europe, and I know there was a breakout session around that, there are a number of reports that IBAT can help with, particularly disclosures around sustainable finance, GRI and others. And there's also a big role for IBAT in the LEAP approach under the TNFD. Okay, so I think I'll just stop there for a moment and just go to questions. I hope you've been following me. I haven't been able to see or hear any of you.
Yeah, no, it's been great. It's great. It's fascinating. Really useful to see. And as I said, we recorded that as well. So we'll share that with the other 280 different members as well. That'd be really useful. But you're welcome to come back in the future as well. If anyone's got any questions for Rebecca, please put your hand up now. We'll just go to Matthew. Do you want to just add some quick final thoughts, Matthew? A bit of an update from you guys at the GEF before we sign off. But if anyone's got any questions, Rebecca, please put them in the chat and we'll either come to them or Rebecca will answer them. So, Matthew. If you're there, Matthew, that is.
I saw Matt earlier and I now can't see him.
That's fine. I saw there was about 3 Matts. I think he was dialed in on his phone, his laptop, and whatever other device he had. So he might not be there. Don't worry.
He was highlighting an event which we can share with everyone in the roundup.
That's fine. Melissa, what's your question for Rebecca?
Well, it was prompted by the last slide that was showing all of the kind of alignment with the frameworks, and it was just with the kind of EUDR work in the back of my mind that I'm doing separately and waiting for the EU Commission to publish the high risk country list. I wondered whether IBAT was engaging either directly or indirectly with the Commission on this.
It's a great question. So there's somebody in mind that I have where I think they probably are, the head of our unit, but we also work very closely with other members of our alliance team. So for example, UNEP WCMC, we have the nature economy team who liaise very closely. So I am sure they will be representing there. But if there's something specific, a specific question or aspect of it, that you'd like me to find out about and come back to you on, I'd be very happy to do that.
We're just waiting for this list, but I understand that it's very political. But yeah, I'll send you a follow-up anyway.
Yes, please do. Please do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Melissa, my co-chair, thank you so much for putting this together again. Melissa, any thoughts from your metals and mining session? I presume you were in that one. Anything that came out compared to the last one? We might as well use the final minutes for that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's good. I mean, there was a really good question around avoided impact and metrics and ways of calculating avoided impact. I think that having an external, I think Irma did a fantastic job and it really, really worked well in that session. We almost ran out of time a bit, which was good. And it prompted some interest in a potential pilot. which is really exciting. So I think we need to do the equivalent for the other groups and kind of look at that continued engagement. There was also a discussion around kind of razor sharp focus and how do we kind of focus on what we can actually make a difference on. But yeah, I think it worked really well.
Good. As I said, this is a massive experiment, everyone, and you're all part of it, and it's your fault if it goes wrong, just to say, to put it all on you guys. But no, it's been fantastic. Thanks so much for all your efforts. You can probably see what we're trying to do. Ultimately, we're getting to a point where everything's narrowing down closer and closer, so you can find more and more things to be able to be doing with each other. So just a quick, what's next? If you like fun guys, or fungi, or fungi, or mushrooms, or things of that nature, you can learn why procurement needs to care about fungi. So on the 20th of November, in partnership with the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, we're going to be helping procurement professionals understand why fungi is so important. So a bit of something off the wall there, should be pretty good. We're planning in December to talk about the internal business case for nature. So those who completed the poll, if you are low in that kind of thing, make sure you turn up to that session. If you're high in that poll, we'll be talking to you very soon, so if you wouldn't mind sharing in that, it's going to be really, really good. We have our next main meeting in January, so after Christmas. We're going to be narrowing down even further with those clusters. There'll be a slightly bigger audience as we start to recruit people around those clusters as well. So if you know people in metals mining, timber, paper and pulp, UK and Europe, you're very welcome. Yes, Rebecca.
I'm typing furiously and I really appreciate all the questions. I'm just thinking, if I can't type the answers by the time we finish the call, is there a way to make sure that I can contact you and follow up with them?
Absolutely. Do you want to put your email in there, Rebecca?
I really appreciate the questions. I'm just not fast enough.
That's fine. Put your email in the chat. That would be a good start. But I'll keep the meeting open for a bit, so if people want to stay, don't worry.
Thank you.
You're too popular, Rebecca. So there we go. And then in February, we're actually going to be looking at beta collection and things like that. We'll be meeting again in March. Now, the big thing news is we're going to be meeting in person on the 7th and 8th of May. We're going to have our Nature and Biodiversity Strategy Days, really. It's a problem with the name, but it's really 2 days. Around 130 of you, so it'll be a bit of first come, first serve. We'll be able to work together over 2 days to really narrow down. Super practical. You'll be pinching ideas, going home with new templates for your strategies and everything else. I hate conferences with a passion, so it will not be sitting and listening to people tell you how wonderful they are. It'll be the complete opposite. It'll be people telling you what went wrong, what they've learned, and pouring their hearts out to you about what they've working on and how you can support them and get involved in it as well. So should be really, really good. You can register for that now. If you go to naturepeergroup.com, you can sign up. Second day is for free, because I believe that you should always have a chance to come for free if you can't afford it. And then the main day you can pay for to support the group as well. I think that's pretty much it, really. Melissa, anything else I've forgotten?
No, I don't think so. The TNFD value chain session, did you mention that in November? I think we have a date, but we can follow up with everyone.
Excellent. And a big shout out for Maeve and Schneider Electric for your session you're doing. Yes, that looked great. Make sure you click on that link in the chat and follow up on that. Okay, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. If anyone wants to have a chat, when you leave, there'll be a survey. Just let us know if you've got any thoughts and ideas. Otherwise, good luck, everyone. And don't let governments and presidents put you off. It's business that will change the world and save nature, I'm sure. So keep up the good work.